All right, we are live New Year's Eve in Northern Kentucky. I'm Ramblin' Rob, host of The Greatest Story Ever Told, here with David Gans. We're enjoying a nice little holiday party here, and I would like to just say a Happy New Year's and Merry Christmas to Dave. Thank you for joining me. Wanted to just start out the interview, kind of running through what you did in 2015. Have you had any highlights that were really memorable this year?
It's been a great year, actually. The end of the year finished strong. I released a book on November 10th and 2 records also in November, all of which are, well, the book and one of the records are about Grateful Dead music, and the second record is original music, so I'm pretty happy with my creative output for the year. And things in my personal life were cool. My wife retired from her teaching job at the end of May, so we're spending more time together, and she's going to be coming with me on some tours in the coming year, so that's kind of an exciting development as well.
Oh, yeah. So how long have you been married for?
We celebrated our 21st anniversary last September.
Big congrats. Way more than the average. And she's an artist too, right?
Yes, and that's one of the cool things about it is that my wife has gone back to painting. So a lot of afternoons in our house are spent with me making music and her making art, which is a nice thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my wife has an art degree. She's an artist. She does a lot of painting. She wanted to do at least, I think, 40 hours a week, kind of going back to that painting thing. So, yeah, it's very relaxing. Very relaxing. So you have a new book out, and I know, after I think playing in the band, that's kind of one of the, I guess my nightstand book. I keep it there for reference, kind of just keep it on there, and probably one of the, in my opinion, I guess, probably one of the best books written about the Grateful Dead and the scene in general. So what made you decide to pick up the pen again and write another book after writing what most people consider the most comprehensive book on the Grateful Dead?
Even a really comprehensive book couldn't do it all. I mean,
it's a long, strange trip.
When Playing in the Band came out in 1985, there were maybe half a dozen books on the Grateful Dead, and since then there are probably like 200 more have been published. I remember thinking in the 80s that those of us writers who thought it was all that important, this Grateful Dead music, should get busy writing the books. And they did. I mean, just this year alone, Bill Kreutzmann published his memoir, David Brown's wonderful book, So Many Roads. Dennis McNally published in November a book of Jerry Garcia interviews. It's just fantastic. Mm-hmm. Peter Richardson published a wonderful book called No Simple Highway. So, and that it adds to an already sort of groaning bookshelf of Dead books. So why another one? That's a very good question. I was approached a couple of years ago by an editor at a publishing house to write a book that was essentially kind of a artistic history or a listening guide to Grateful Dead with sort of essays on all the important songs and stuff. And I had a wonderful time working on that book. But as I got about 80% of the way through it, the publishing industry did its thing. They laid off the editor and sold my contract off to somebody else. And that second publishing house opted not to publish the book. So essentially, they handed me back this project and said, we ain't going to do this.
Wow. And
with a sort of a conditional release, if I could sell it someplace else, it'd be okay, etc. So my agent shopped it around. I sort of rewrote the proposal, and I had all this huge amount of sample text. I'd written this huge essay about Dark Star and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so she shopped that around, and none of the publishers was interested in it. But one publisher, Bob Miller, who was my editor on my first book 30 years ago on Playing in the Band, he said, well, I can't publish that book, but I'd love to work with David again. Is there anything else he's interested in working on? And my agent had been suggesting to me for some time that I participate in an oral history of the Grateful Dead, and that I collaborate with Blair Jackson, my friend and neighbor and longtime associate in Grateful Dead journalism. So Blair and I both liked that idea a lot, and basically she came to us and said, look, Bob is interested in doing a book, and just write a proposal and he'll accept it. So it was kind of like presented as a done deal that we could
Right.
hardly say no to. So Blair and I batted out a proposal in just a few days and handed it over, and I was on my way out of town to a vacation in Peru at that time. And by the time we got back from our vacation, we had a deal. So in November of 2013, we went to work. And we spent about a year gathering material for it. And of course, Blair has also written several books on the Grateful Dead. He wrote Garcia, An American Life, sort of the definitive biography of Jerry. He wrote a wonderful book called Grateful Dead Gear, which is sort of a technical history of the Grateful Dead. Had done a book called Going Down the Road, a traveling companion, which was composed mostly of material from his amazing fanzine that he and his wife published for several years in the 80s. Oh, yeah. So we both had a huge sort of roster of stuff we had already done, and to go with it, file cabinets full of material that we had gathered over the years. My last book on the Dead was Conversations with the Dead, which was published in 1991 and then updated some years later. Mm-hmm. But ever since that, I mean, those were complete interviews and stuff. But I had been doing radio journalism on the Dead for 20 years after that, right? So even though Blair and I agreed that we weren't going to reuse material, stuff that had been in those other books we considered off limits, which meant huge amounts of, like, for instance, our two-part 1981 interview with Jerry had basically, we'd both used it so much in our other works that we kind of agreed to leave it out. Right. But we had plenty of material that we had already gathered, and we spent that year gathering lots of new material. I'd say probably 60 to 75% of the book is new stuff that we generated for this project. Interviewed a lot of people you'd never heard from before. A fellow by the name of Steve Brown, who was a fan in the 60s and then worked for Grateful Dead Records in the 70s, and has some wonderful stories. He was with the band on the Europe 74 tour, for example. A woman named Gail Helland, who was a teenager in the Haight and was sort of one of the original hippies right in that neighborhood, and then went on to become a member of the Grateful Dead tribe and was working for the Dead at the time when Lenny Hart was robbing the band. And her story of the day they figured out that Lenny had been ripping them off was an amazing story with a kicker that I will not give away. So we gathered huge amounts of new material, and we spent that year, I created a Google Docs domain for us, and we had a little bucket for each year, and we both went through our material separately and dropped little stories into these bins by year, right? And then we sat down together and worked out a chapter structure, which turned out to be 11 major beats of Grateful Dead history. So we took all of those little bits we dumped into those buckets and started sorting them into these chapter threads, right? And that became the book. And then we work, again, mostly working separately, but we would take turns, like, okay, you'll do chapter 1, I'll do chapter 2, and then we left all of the work product in these files, so each of us could go in, and there were actually moments, because of the way Google Docs worked, when I would be editing a page in a chapter in our book, and I would see changes being made, because Blair, who lives, by the way, down the street, just a few doors away from me, so we were literally able to walk back and forth, to work on it, but I'd be sitting there typing on my laptop, and he would be editing the same page, and I'd see the changes going down. Very strange thing to do with this modern age.
Technology, right?
Yeah, but it was a very, very pleasant and surprisingly painless process. I'm not a very disciplined writer, and sweat bullets over stuff and take forever and always missed my deadlines when I was a freelance writer and stuff. But this was surprisingly easy and fun to do, partly because Blair and I are good friends. We have very similar styles. I will admit that I copped a lot of licks from him. He was my editor at BAM magazine when I was a young journalist in the 70s and 80s. So we sort of grew up together as journalists and as deadheads, and we have a good working relationship. And it was a completely frictionless process, I have to say. There was not one single moment of argument over what to leave in, what to take out, what tone to take. And I would also, we wrote a lot of linking material. The fundamental nature of the book is that it's everybody speaking for themselves.
Right.
That's what oral history is. It's not a narrative written by an author. It's a narrative assembled by an author / editor of other people's first person narratives. So what we do is we create the story by taking a quote from Jerry, a quote from Bob, a quote from Pigpen, a quote from Rock Scully, a quote from John McIntyre, a quote from, well, no, hey, Rock, whatever. Rock's book was full of weird stuff and had a lot of errors in it, but it was fundamentally a true story. And he gave us an amazing interview just a couple of months before he died. We went down to his place in Monterey, and we had a great day with him. He told us wonderful stuff. And in fact, we were in the process of scheduling another interview with him when he got sick and died. So we missed out on that. But we had to write little bits of linking stuff to sort of set up the next passage and stuff. And I think you would be very, very hard pressed to look at the book and say, well, Blair wrote this and David wrote that. Because we're both guys that like to keep it light, and we're both guys that'll write funny stuff. But we're also both pretty serious about the subject matter and sort of non-blue or purple journalists, right? We don't like to use a lot of fancy words and stuff. We like to let the story tell itself. So I think you'd have a hard time picking which thing. Like, for example, the intro, which is the only long piece of original writing in the book. I took the first stab at it, stayed up late one night and just blasted out a bunch of stuff onto a page, moved it around a little bit, handed it over to Blair. He added some stuff to it, took a few things out, rearranged it a bit, and handed it back to me. And that's how we collaborated. Each of us would take a piece, work on it, hand it to the other guy. So we batted things back and forth between us in a just completely equal partnership.
Yeah.
And so we were both really pleased with the result. We turned in a manuscript of 220,000 words. And I don't remember what our contract asked for, but it was significantly less than that. However, the editor, Bob Miller, who, by the way, is the guy who came up with the wonderful title for the book. So Bob's fingerprints are on this in a wonderful way as well. He was also just a total breeze to work with. He was completely into it, completely respected our voice and our wishes, and there was no conflict with him over anything. He looked at it. My agent, our agent, Blair's my agent, we turned in the book. She, like the next day, said, "Oh, this is great." We said, "You read it already?" She said, "Oh, I don't read books. I weigh them." That's a joke, of course. But Bob said, well, this is considerably longer than we were expecting, but it's great. So he asked us to cut 40,000 words out instead of saying, he could have said, cut this down to 100,000 words and I'll print it. He might have wanted a 400-page book, but we wound up with a 512-page book, and he was totally cool about that. So we spent 13 hours together, sitting, just like you and I are sitting together on a couch. We sat together in my living room with my laptop and went through the entire book from top to bottom, cutting things out.
Wow.
And it was it was a completely pleasant and fun process. And we both agreed that it strengthened the book, that we were cutting out stuff that was okay to remove. We never felt like we were taking the guts out of it in any important way. So, and everybody involved in the process, the book was produced by our agent and her husband, who did the cover was designed in-house at Flatiron Books, but the design of the book was managed by our agent and her husband, who are a book packaging partnership. So again, we were participants in it. It wasn't a thing where they took the project away from us and handed it to other people, and we were horrified by the result. I know other journalists, other writers who've had
Terrapin Station syndrome.
Other writers have had the publisher put like a horrible cover on their book and things like that we didn't have to deal with. We loved the cover. We said, look, we don't want any dancing bears. We don't want any tie-dye.
Right.
We don't want any bogus psychedelic BS on this. We want a nice, classy-looking book. Mm-hmm. And they gave us that. They bought a wonderful photo from Herb Green of the Dead that was taken in 1967 before Mickey Hart joined, which is why he's not in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a beautiful cover with, metallic type and a clean design. And there were no dancing bears in the text either. Harry Choron, the designer of the book, came up with this beautiful crow icon, which it was used in a large sort of screened image on the title page and then appears as section markers in the book and things like that. So we got what we wanted, a beautiful, clean, readable design with no psychedelic pandering in it. And a manuscript that we were happy with that encompassed everything that we wanted to say. So everybody was pleased, and the authors were just incredibly happy with the way everybody treated us all the way through.
Yeah, I saw the picture. I really liked the picture that was chosen for the. I'd never seen that picture before, actually. And I interviewed Herbie earlier this year. He's a really good guy, and he's just an iconic photographer. I mean, you can't really get any better as far as capturing that. I guess the craziness and the raw craziness you could say of those early years with the guys.
Well, Herbie was in that neighborhood. He'll tell you himself, he was just the guy in the neighborhood with a camera, just like the other guys were bands,
Mm-hmm.
So he was taking pictures of everybody in that scene. He was a member of that tribe. That's one thing that young fans need to remember is the Haight-Ashbury thing. The Summer of Love came from, it was a neighborhood scene. It was a bunch of college students and artists just hanging out and doing stuff for themselves, and it became this nexus of world cultural, weirdness and stuff. But it began as just a bunch of people making art for each other. And all of the bands that came out of that thing, it was a neighborhood thing, Big Brother was rehearsing in this basement at 1090 Page when Janice, showed up because Chet Helms had brought her out from Texas and said, "I got a band for you, and I got a singer for you guys." She just walked in and started singing with them, and the Airplane was a neighborhood band too, right? So all this stuff, Herbie was just a part of that scene.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Gene Anthony is another great photographer from that time. Jim Marshall was around, of course, an entirely different kind of character from Herb. Anyway.
Yeah, Herbie seemed like a pretty straight-laced type of guy when I was talking to him.
He's he puts on a good front, but he's a pretty crazy dude.
Is he?
Oh yeah.
He always kind of led me to believe he was the straight guy capturing all the craziness or something.
Yes, well.
He fooled us.
I've spent a lot of time late night at music festivals with Herbie, so don't let the tucked in exterior fool you.
So you've got the new album coming out. You were in Cincinnati just last night for New Year's Eve, playing over at, I believe, the Thompson House with the kind of the second time in town doing the New Year's Eve thing. I'm sure that went very well. I heard a couple reviews, and it went very well. But you're concentrating a little bit more on your music and less on hosting the radio show that we've all kind of grown to love. Do you think it's a little, I guess, the real question is it easy or hard to kind of let that go? It's kind of your baby.
Well, I'm still doing 2 radio shows. I gave up the one I was doing on KPFA at home, Dead to the World,
Right.
But I'm still doing the 2 shows that I actually get paid for, and that I've been doing I've been doing Grateful Dead Hour for more than 30 years, and that's on WNKU here, not on your station. Sorry to say.
No, we're community.
That's all right. Well, so is WNKU, but
Right.
anyway, and I also do a talk show on Sirius XM's Grateful Dead channel. Those are great gigs. I'm not going to give up anytime soon. But I have always been a musician. I was a songwriter before I ever heard the Grateful Dead, and they changed my way of thinking and inspired me greatly. And I obviously spent a lot of time studying Grateful Dead music and documenting it all. But I never ever was not primarily a musician. What I've done in recent years, I started touring in 1998, basically. And I basically spent close to 20 years now developing my own national musical presence without giving up these other things because
Right.
first of all, I still got to pay my mortgage and music isn't enough. I can't afford to quit those other jobs, and
Right,
I'm
right.
not really interested in quitting those jobs because I love those jobs too. But my main focus has always been music. And I've written my own songs. Again, I was writing songs before I ever heard the Dead. But I also started incorporating Grateful Dead music into my thing and learned a lot from the Grateful Dead about how music is made. And I've been playing music with Deadheads for upwards of 40 years now.
Right.
And one of the things I love about my life now is that I can go out to some town I'd never been in before and meet up with musicians and play this music. And that's just immensely gratifying. It's like bluegrass or Dixieland or any other kind of music that's sort of a genre unto itself. If you know the language of that music, you can go have a conversation with other people that's valid and worth listening to the very first time. So Grateful Dead music is like a language that we speak together.
Mm-hmm. It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, I never really thought of it like that, but yeah.
But
I'm not a musician.
I also have to add that I've always put my own spin on it. My interest has always been to have that conversation in my own voice, rather than, everybody goes through that phase of learning other people's music and sounding like other people, and in most cases, it's on your way toward becoming yourself. Because I started writing songs at the exact same moment I started playing guitar, I kind of never went through that phase of completely identifying with somebody else. I learned a lot of Dead music, but I was also playing Crosby, Stills, and Nash songs and Cat Stevens songs and adapting Elton John songs for guitar and things like that. So I always played other people's music and wove them into my own narrative, which is, by the way, exactly what the Grateful Dead did. They made up their own amazing songs, but they also always played other people's songs and regarded all of it as material. That's where they privileged their own songs and other people's songs equally and treated them both as material to tell their story. And that's exactly what I do. I take songs from other people, including the Dead, and incorporate them into my own personal narrative. So the record that I just came out with, It's a Hand-Me-Down,
Right.
is not a record of somebody trying to sound exactly like the Dead. This is a record of somebody taking those songs and rendering them in his own style. So there's one guitar with overdubs and one voice. There's no background singers on this because it's a solo record. But because the way I perform involves using a loop device that allows me to stack up more than one guitar, there's more than one guitar on this record. But it's solo performances in the manner of my solo live performances. But I changed the key on various songs, I changed the groove, I changed the chords even in a couple songs, and, believe it or not, even changed a word or two here and there.
Which is fine.
So if you're expecting a clone, you're not going to get it, but if you want to hear somebody taking these songs in his own direction, this record is for you.
Yeah, I just was kind of looking at the eclectic mix, Jerry Heavy mix here. Are these kind of your favorite songs to do, or your favorite songs to listen to, or I guess how did you really come up with picking these songs for the album?
These are the songs that I can do. I mean, there are a lot of Dead songs that I would love to play, but don't really work in a solo arrangement. It's like I haven't figured out how to do, songs that are big jamming vehicles and stuff. It's like, the other one isn't a song that I'm likely to do solo because mostly it's just like a short piece of music, a short composition with this gigantic improvisation in it. Dark Star is a song. I've occasionally done Dark Star, but these are the songs that work in a solo configuration, and they're the songs that I could fit on a record. I recorded a few more, and then realized I had more than enough to fill an 80-minute CD, so I stopped making new recordings and listened to the ones that I had and picked. I had to leave a few off I may do another record of dead songs because I probably have enough to fill another record when I think about it. But there are songs that work in my solo presentation. So it tends to be the quieter songs. There's a lot of ballads on there. It's got Wharf Rat and Stella Blue and Black Peter and Broke Down Palace and Addicts of My Life, right? And there's not a, yeah, kind of. There's not a Shakedown Street. I mean, I love playing in the band, but it's not a song that I figured out how to do in a solo configuration yet. I've actually recently started working on doing Shakedown Street as a solo number just to see if I can make it work. But you know, it's stuff. Yeah, it's stuff that makes sense in the setting that I perform live in. There are lots of other Dead songs that I do when I'm able to work with other musicians and when I jam with other guys. You know, I like Candyman is a great song. I love doing that when I'm with other musicians, but I can't quite make it work interesting. I could just play the chords and do it solo, but I don't think it would be very interesting for me to do it that way. So, you know, and in any given situation, like I'm playing a house concert where I'll do 2 long sets, I'll pull some off the wall thing just to see if it works and have some fun with it because I'm an improvisational musician and I know the material really well and I like to take chances when I'm performing. But this is the stuff that worked, that I felt solid about, and that I felt like I was doing something interesting with it, like a solo arrangement of Terrapin Station, Lady with a Fan, you know. That sort of started out as kind of a parlor trick. I just wanted to see if I could do it. And it turned out to be just a really, really strong song for me to do. I open up the jam at the end of Lady with a Fan and do some looping stuff where I stack up 3 or 4 guitars and then do some improvising over it and things like that. So there are ways to keep it interesting as a solo performer. It's not just one guy and one guitar. It's one guy with a guitar that can double itself and triple itself on occasion to keep things interesting and creative.
Yeah, we'll be playing some of that over the next couple months of the new year. Also, you have another album out, Busy Man, that you are. You are here. Can you tell us a little bit about this one? Looking at the song list, like I said a little bit earlier, it doesn't, after seeing you a lot, it doesn't look like any of these are familiar to me. I guess these are all newer songs?
Well, actually, no. This is a record of recordings. I love going in the studio, and I love playing music with other people. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been working with an engineer, Jeremy Goody, at a studio called Megasonic Sound in Piedmont, California, near where I live. We're just good buds. We like to hang out and play and record. So I sort of keep a little, money in a sock. And when I get a few $100 together, I'll hire some guys and get together and play and record something in the studio. Recently, I've been doing that as pure improvisation, not even songs. Let's just start playing and see what happens. And I've released a few of those things on Bandcamp. But this record I did a Kickstarter for my album, and I wanted to make an EP of original songs to give as a reward for people who, when you do a Kickstarter, you have to come up with levels. Like for $15 you get a download, for $25 you get a signed album, for $75 you get a T-shirt and a signed album and a download, that kind of thing. So I came up with an EP of some of these recordings that I had made, and I got some great guys in there. Mark Caron and Robin Sylvester of Rat Dog play on it. A couple of great bluegrass musicians, Jacob Grootman and Leif Karlstrom, who were in a band called Front Country. And various other guys, Mookie Siegel from the David Nelson Band. I have good friends that I take in a studio to record. So I was going to put together an EP, like 4 or 5 songs that I had already recorded and not released on anything yet, to use as a reward for the Kickstarter thing. But when I put together a playlist of all the tunes that I've recorded, I realized I had a full album's worth. That was worth doing. Mm-hmm. So I built it into my budget that I would master and release this record as a premium for the Kickstarter. But I was so pleased with the collection that I decided to just release it quietly along with It's a Hand-Me-Down. And I'll confess to you, Rob, that one of the reasons I did that was that I'm doing a book about the Grateful Dead, and a record of Grateful Dead songs. And I didn't want people to think I was only a Grateful Dead guy. I've been writing original music longer than I've been a Deadhead.
Right.
So this was kind of a stealthy way of asserting my originality and my individuality along with this other thing. All the promotion, all the advertising is directed to the Grateful Dead record, and I released it in, tandem with the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted this out there that I could have on my merch table to say, look, I also write my own music.
Right.
And by the way, one of the songs is a co-write with Robert Hunter of the Grateful Dead, who sent me the lyrics. Yeah, I've written 2 songs with Hunter that are on various records.
Oh, nice. And which one did you write with Bob here?
Shut Up and Listen.
Shut Up and Listen. Well, if it's any consolation, whenever I play your music on my show, I very rarely play cover tunes. It's usually your original stuff. Like last night I did, I think, River and Drown.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I really like that tune.
Good.
Really like that tune. So yeah, I don't do much of the covers, but you do. I like to do covers well.
Thank you.
So we touched base a little bit on the book and the albums. Have you got any big plans for 2016 coming up? I mean, after that whiz-bang year 2015, is there anything else left for you to do?
Yeah, now I got to make it all work. I did, the Kickstarter was very successful. I raised enough money to pay for releasing the record with good art and got it mastered by a great guy, Dave Glasser at Air Show. And I had the money to pay a publicist and a radio promotion guy. I spent the month of December stuffing things in envelopes, and I probably spent $3,000 on postage. Because you send out 150 pieces to press and hope you get reviews. Then you send out 300 pieces to radio and hope you get airplay.
Yeah, maybe.
So all that stuff, I finished those things just a few days ago. I took the last trip to the post office a couple days after Christmas. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sick and tired of jamming labels on envelopes, right? But now it's all out there. Now we follow up and see who will give us an interview and a review and who's going to play it on the radio. Now I got to get my butt out there on the road and tour and support this and sell the record. So my plan for 2016 is to keep making music.
Sounds like a good plan to me. I won't argue with that. So I know that the Grateful Dead kind of had their little reunion deal. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. I was listening to you in the car on the Sirius radio in the driveway because I wasn't up there. I guess real quick, what was your take about the whole Chicago deal and the reunion? I guess you were up there and I listened to it. It sounded like you and especially your co-host were having a phenomenally fun time.
Well, Gary Lambert is just one of the happiest guys ever. He's always
cracking
having a
it
good time.
up.
Oh yeah, he's a very enthusiastic dude. I'm a little bit more of a reality check guy, but I had a great time, man. I went to Chicago with basically no expectations and see how it went, And I had just a great time. The whole town was rolled out the tie-dyed carpet for us, and everywhere we went there were just people having fun. And I mean, I was having breakfast with a friend one morning right near the venue, and the people at the next table picked up the tabs. Oh, we listened to Tales from the Golden Road and wanted to buy you breakfast. It was really sweet. And we did the pre-show thing there. We had a 3-hour pre-show every day. We were in a tent down by the will call booth outside the venue. And I thought, 3 hours of pre-show, kill me now. But it turned out to be just huge fun because people we knew were walking by, and we would just grab somebody and pull them in and interview them and stuff. And like the Rumpke Mountain Boys came by with their instruments and played a few tunes live, and Trixie Garcia and old friends of mine, so like I'd be in the middle of doing a rave on the show and somebody I know and love would walk by and I'd just jump up and go out there and give them a hug and stuff. So we wound up having a great time doing the pre-show broadcast, and then we went up to the press box on the second level and watched the show. We had great seats. We had the webcast feed on a video monitor in front of us. We had great sound. And so and I liked the music. I wasn't sure how good the music was going to be, and I just thought the music was great. So, and then I also really enjoyed what I've heard of Dead and Company, and I heard at the end of the New Year's Eve show, John Mayer said they're going to be back next year. I think that's really cool. So I'm really happy that all these Grateful Dead people are still making music, and in big venues and small. Phil's doing all of his stuff in different contexts, and Mickey and Billy and Bob want to do this thing. More power to them, man. I like the music, so.
Yeah, amen. Keep on trucking. That's what I always say. Yeah, I mean, and it always will be. I mean, if it's not these guys, I mean, I think the music in itself, there's all these bands that have came out of the scene because of the Grateful Dead that keep perpetuating both the lifestyle and the music. So I think it's a never-ending continuum of craziness, pretty much.
And I agree with you. That's another thing. In the 70s, when I was a kid playing this music, I found other guys that wanted to play this music. It's fun music to play. And everywhere I go, there's youngsters playing this music. I've played music with Deadheads who couldn't possibly have heard Jerry play live. Oh, yeah. And they're into this music because there's this immense archive. You can study it. You can get up to speed on it. You can trace the entire evolution of the music. You can learn that language. You can play along with Dead tapes for years until you're good enough to get out and play with other people. Then you can hook up with your buddies and play Dead music. So we're all keeping it alive, and it's just incredibly gratifying to go out and play with guys in their 20s who love this music as much as I do at my age.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to live forever. We knew that. I thought in the 70s that, in the 80s, that this music was immortal, that it would outlive the guys who made it, and it is doing so. It's great music.
Right. Well, both me and you, though. I mean, I won't say the first time I heard it, but the first time I consciously was aware of it, I mean, it was a paradigm shift in the way I live my life, and you too. So, I mean, I won't say it's that contagious, but when the bug catches you, it changes you. Well, we're going to wrap this up here. I just got one more quick little question here. Do you have a favorite Grateful Dead song that you like more than any others, or perhaps like performing live more than any other?
I don't really like that question because no, I've never been a list maker in that way. It's like I don't like the whole obsessive. Even though I was a music journalist, mm-hmm. and it was my main thing for like the 70s and 80s. I've never been a guy who liked to do like a year-end top 10 and stuff. It's like I like a lot.
Right.
And the stuff I don't like, I'm not going to bother saying bad things about, and my people will say, "What's your favorite Grateful Dead show?" And I go, "Well, I hate to narrow it down to even like 10 or 20 of them. I'll tell you 5/19/74, but if you ask me tomorrow, I'll tell you 5/15/70." Or it's like they're and in my own performance, different songs kind of rise and fall, like I'm really into doing Wharf Rat these days just because I'm sort of feeling the way that song works, and I feel like it's coming out of me mm-hmm. in a way that is valuable and effective, But then, in a couple weeks when I go out on the road again, maybe another song will be the one that sort of grabs me the most. So I don't make set lists ahead of time. I go on stage with maybe a short menu of things I want to do tonight, but I don't really have a running order in mind. And I listen to myself as I'm going along. And while I'm doing one song, I start thinking about what the next song is going to be, and if there's a way I can connect to it improvisationally, or just what song I'm going to start next, whatever. So it just varies. The Grateful Dead made so many amazing songs, and they took so many other people's songs and made new music of mm-hmm. them, that I don't really think it's necessary or even a worthwhile exercise to narrow it down to a list of them. I think you should listen to all of it and stick with the stuff you like, and right. And keep expanding your horizons. And also, listen to non-Grateful Dead music. I think Jerry Garcia would be the first guy to tell you that listening to only him is an incredibly limiting thing. As great as Jerry was, and as deeply as we all feel his music, he would have told you to go listen to Ornette Coleman, or listen to Bill Monroe, or listen to Scotty Stoneman, or You know, that one of the reasons the Grateful Dead is so amazing was that the guys that made that music were very, very different. When they came together, they all had different styles and different favorite music that they brought into the thing. So they created this mix. LSD was this great sort of liquefying factor that allowed everybody to merge their consciousness and make a music that had Bill Monroe and Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane and Charles Ives in it, right? That all the concepts of all those different kinds of music could be made to talk to each other in this conversation that's just so deep and rich. So our mission is to carry that conversation on in our own voices and keep making it deeper and richer.
And with that wise words, I will conclude this interview. David Gans, thank you very much. We're going to be listening to him in just a little bit. I'm going to hopefully be recording that show, and we'll be playing that over the next couple months. So we bid you a happy 2016, and we will be touching base with you shortly.